What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, then welcome to our little corner of the internet. And excuse my voice. um I don't know why, but I feel like it's the cold from the outside and the warmth from the inside that's making my voice and my throat not very happy. um but despite that, I just recently discovered this channel. His name is Simon, and he has so many different channels, like literally my spirit animal, because I've been thinking about opening up new channels for like all of the fun stuff we used to do on this channel. Or I don't really know yet what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing, okay? I don't know what I'm doing. Um but he also touches on some current topics. So today we're going to be watching a video from him titled Israel's Invasion of Lebanon has begun. Let's see what this video is about.
Day 6. Give it up for day 6. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back at it again after a fresh day jam-packed with developments throughout the Middle East. There's still lots going on inside of Iran, which has dominated the headlines, but we're shifting our focus north today, because what's happening in Lebanon right now might end up being one of the most consequential events of the entire war. Israel and Hezbollah are at war again. The ceasefire that ended their 2024 conflict lasted all of 48 hours into this current war, and as you can imagine, Hezbollah is firing rockets into Israel, which is in return shooting back a hell of a lot harder. That part of the story is dramatic enough on its own. But what's really significant here is what the Lebanese government just did in the middle of this: a total ban on Hezbollah's military and security operations. If you would have told us that we'd be making an episode on that just 2 years ago, we would have thought you were dreaming, or possibly really rather drunk. But 2026 has been full of surprises, and this may be one of the most...
How crazy is it? It's only been 3 months of this year, and so much has happened. Like, when do we get a break? 2020 on its own, since 2020, I feel like it's just been crazy. It's been crazy. Wait, was COVID before 2020? I was 18 at the time, 2019 maybe. I think it was 2020-ish.
This may be one of the most impactful of them all. The myth collapses. For the better part of 2 decades, there was one assumption that absolutely dominated nearly every conversation about the Middle East's balance of power. If anyone ever came for Iran, and by anyone we specifically mean the United States or Israel, Hezbollah would make them pay. Tehran, using allies in both Baghdad and Damascus, had spent years smuggling rockets and missiles across their territory and into Lebanon for their friends over there. And it paid off. By 2024, Hezbollah had amassed the largest non-state stockpile in history, clocking in at an estimated 150,000 to 200,000 rockets and missiles. Hezbollah's strongholds had long been in the southern parts of the country, specifically those south of the Litani River. From there, rockets launched would take only a moment to cross the border into northern Israel, giving any Israeli missile defense system a precariously narrow window to activate and shoot them down. Assuming that they'd be able to launch thousands of rockets per day for a nearly indefinite period of time, no conceivable missile defense system would be able to intercept them all. There was credibility to this theory beyond just speculation about what would be theoretically possible too. Back in 2006, Hezbollah fought the Israeli military.
Excuse me. Can you guys believe that before this, I didn't even know that missiles could be intercepted? I didn't know that. Like, I didn't even think about that. Which then in my mind, like, a war is just accepting that everything's going to fall apart. But now I know that they can be intercepted, which is it's, well, I wouldn't say calming, since this is not a very calm situation, but it does give a sense of ease, in a way, that there is a way to intercept missiles, since I honestly didn't know that before.
Intercept them all. There was credibility to this theory beyond just speculation about what would be theoretically possible too. Back in 2006, Hezbollah fought the Israeli military into what could be variously described as either a draw or, as a more general perception in the Arab world held, a Hezbollah victory. Israel went into that war with the stated goal of destroying Hezbollah's military capability and recovering 2 of their soldiers who had been captured in a cross-border attack. Yet, after 34 days of bombardment and ground operations, it had achieved neither, and Hezbollah was firing rockets into Israel until the very final hours of the conflict. The group's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, declared it to be a divine victory, and whether or not that label was justified, it sure as hell resonated through the region. Hundreds of thousands rallied in support of the group in Beirut, and Hezbollah's statue as the premier resistance movement was cemented overnight. That perception, arguably more than the rockets themselves, became the foundation for everything that was to come. The organization at its height absolutely dominated Lebanese politics, essentially transforming themselves into a state within a state. They anchored Iran's regional strategy by giving Tehran a retaliatory umbrella should either Washington or Jerusalem try something. In the years that followed, Hezbollah used the relative calm along the border to massively build up their capabilities with Iranian help, which is where that massive stockpile of munitions we referenced came from. The day after Hamas's October 7th attack, Hezbollah opened what they described as a support front, sustained but limited rocket and drone fire into northern Israel that nonetheless displaced over 60,000 civilians for more than a year, but fell short of an all-out barrage. Israel had tolerated the situation for months, but by the fall of 2024...
Is that Israel? Wow, it looks really, really, really pretty. It looks really pretty. I mean, this the beachfront with the park. I've never seen anything from Israel. I don't think so. Okay.
Barrage. Israel had tolerated the situation for months, but by the fall of 2024, the domestic implications of acting had become impossible to ignore. And that brings us to September 2024, when Israeli intelligence detonated roughly 5,000 pages and several hundred more walkie-talkies.
What happened?
Of acting had become impossible to ignore. And that brings us to September 2024, when Israeli intelligence detonated roughly 5,000 pages and several hundred more walkie-talkies that had been distributed throughout Hezbollah's ranks, killing 42 people, wounding another roughly 3,500, and completely destroying significant portions of the group's internal communications network. What was left was viewed with deep skepticism. After the pages started blowing up, they'd switch to walkie-talkies, only to have those walkie-talkies blow up as well. This turned out to be the opening salvo of an Israeli campaign to render the Hezbollah threat null and void, a campaign that moved faster and hit harder than just about anyone had anticipated. Hassan Nasrallah, the man who had led the group for over 3 decades, was killed within a month of the pager detonations, along with a staggering number of the group's upper leadership that had survived the pager attacks. Hezbollah's rocket launchers during the war peaked at around 240 per day, which isn't nothing, but it's also a far cry from the doomsday scenarios that had haunted Israeli military planners and civilians alike. Part of this was down to the complete collapse of the group's leadership and communication systems rolled into one. Think of it this way. In the aftermath of the pager incident, the people both calling the shots and planning the group's strategy were those deemed unworthy of owning a pager just a week prior. Amid the chaos, as they scrambled to regroup and get a coherent strategy together, Israel destroyed an estimated 80% of the group's rocket stockpiles and confiscated over 85,000 weapons in southern Lebanon. By November, Hezbollah signed a ceasefire on terms that would have been absolutely unthinkable just 6 months prior, a full withdrawal from the areas it controlled south of the Litani River, with a US side letter recognizing Israel's right to strike if the agreement was violated. The war may have been over, but for the Lebanese people left to clean up the fallout, the damage extended well beyond what Israel had done to Hezbollah. A country trying to break free. And then came 2026. Whatever fragile equilibrium that held since the ceasefire, that evaporated real fast after the US and Israel began their campaign and killed Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei in the opening waves. The ceasefire had been fraying for some time before that. Israel had never fully stopped striking into Lebanon, maintaining permanent military outposts on the Lebanese side of the border and
This was what I understood. Like, wasn't Iran the first one to fire? Or, I mean, I guess this has been going on for way longer than what my brain comprehends, but that's what I understood.
In the opening waves. The ceasefire had been fraying for some time before that. Israel had never fully stopped striking into Lebanon, maintaining permanent military outposts on the Lebanese side of the border and conducting roughly 1,600 strikes, according to data compiled by ACLED. by the start of this year alone. But when Operation Epic Fury began, the pretense of a ceasefire disappeared real fast. Remember, Hezbollah had more or less built its raison d'etre around standing up to Israel, especially in the event that it went after Iran. On March the 2nd, just 2 days after the strikes kicked off, Hezbollah threw their hat in the ring by launching rockets and drones at an Israeli missile defense site near Haifa, the first such attack since the ceasefire was signed. The barrage was framed as retaliation for Khamenei's killing, a signal that the group still stood with its patron. Israel intercepted the majority of the incoming fire, and what did get through mostly landed in open areas without causing casualties. But unlike the single failed salvo that some had expected from a degraded force, Hezbollah just kept firing. Dozens of squadrons targeted the Ramat David Air Base and the Meron Air Operations Center. Rocket salvos hit the Nafar base in the Golan Heights at positions at Bayan Baruch, and by March the 3rd, anti-tank guided missiles were striking Israeli Merkava tanks near the border. Now, it was pretty clear going into this that the group was still severely degraded from the position that they were in prior to 2024, but they were still very much in the game. Then, on the 4th of March, a long-range strike reached Tel Aviv in conjunction with Iranian salvos, wounding 2 people, making it clear that this wasn't just a symbolic gesture. Hezbollah may be down, but they certainly weren't out. The Israeli response...
Sorry, I'm gonna listen to that again. Sorry.
Iranian salvos, wounding 2 people,
Wait, what?
4, but they were still very much in the game.
Yes.
Then, on the 4th of March, a long-range strike reached Tel Aviv in conjunction with Iranian salvos, wounding 2 people, making it clear that this wasn't just a symbolic gesture.
Terror group carries out first long-range attack since start of Iran war. No safe place for Iranian regime in Lebanon.
Hezbollah may be down, but they certainly weren't out. The Israeli response came, as you might have expected, with overwhelming force. In one day alone, over 250 airstrikes tore through Beirut's southern suburbs, the Bekaa Valley, and villages across the south, targeting weapons depots, rocket launch sites, command centers, and communications infrastructure, including seriously damaging Hezbollah's media empire's buildings, Al-Manar TV and Al-Nur Radio. Israeli officials were already telling the New York Times that the operation had been in planning for months and could evolve into something much more ambitious, so they clearly were expecting that Hezbollah would take some action. What exactly they have in mind with their more ambitious campaigns is something that only time will tell, but it is not looking like they're exactly going out to negotiate another ceasefire. On the ground, Israel sent the 91st Territorial Division across the border after ordering nearly 100 towns and villages south of the Litani to evacuate, and has since called up over 100,000 reservists. The IDF also confirmed it killed a senior IRGC Quds Force commander, Reza Karzai, in Lebanon, effectively severing what remained of the Iranian Hezbollah command chain. So far, so on brand for this war, one in which the US and Israel have used overwhelming force to wipe out swaths of senior leadership in the axis of resistance. But it was what came next that made this theater of conflict so noteworthy, that made us
I'm sure I'm not the only one who finds this very confusing. Like, it's so hard to follow this video because there's so much information.
It was what came next.
I'm trying my best.
That made this theater of conflict so noteworthy, that made us decide to devote a whole episode to what's happening in Lebanon. The fact that the Lebanese government chose, after decades of weakness, to go after Hezbollah. Prime Minister Nawaf Salam's cabinet declared an immediate, total ban on all Hezbollah military and security activities and ordered the group to surrender its weapons to the state. President Joseph Aoun, the former army commander who had been elected after Hezbollah could no longer block the vote, called the decision final. In what has been the most notable development of all, Nabir Berri, the Speaker of Parliament and leader of the Amal movement, Hezbollah's most reliable political partner for decades, refused to vote against the measure. To be clear, for analysts used to how things go down in Lebanon, these developments are wild. Go back in time just 2 years and tell people that this would happen and they'd be all like, that's some sweet stuff you're smoking, bro. Who's your dealer? Hezbollah, for their part, have said the move was unjustified and have largely dismissed the whole thing. But open defiance sounds very different when you've lost your leader, most of your command structure, and now your most important political ally. Question now, is whether the Lebanese government is actually in a position to follow through on its promise, and whether Israel can now finish the group once and for all. Now, before we get into whether Israel can actually finish the job this time, a quick note about Fronts.co, our subscriber site for those who want to go deeper on stories like this one. Every week, we put out 2 exclusive videos and 2 expert articles.
I feel like I need a 1-hour class to understand.
Let's get back to the fate of Hezbollah. Third time's the charm? Now, there's a pretty sizable camp in Washington that sees the current moment as the best chance anyone will ever have to finish Hezbollah off, and they're not being quiet about it. An analyst for the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, a leading think tank on the region, has called this moment one of de-Hezbollification. Not the catchiest slogan, and a hell of a mouthful, while others at the Washington Institute have warned that this represents a once-in-a-generation window that, if missed, may never open again. From Israel's perspective, the strategic alignment couldn't be better. Permanent Hezbollah disarmament has been an Israeli objective for decades, but never really got off the ground given A, the constant flow of munitions to Lebanon from Tehran, and B, a government in Beirut that was, at best, merely the second most powerful force in the country. IDF chief Zamir has stated that the goal is no longer limited to enforcement of UN Security Council Resolution 1701, but rather full and complete disarmament. There is, however, a rather uncomfortable pattern that anyone viewing the current moment would do well to remember, because Israel has been to war in Lebanon before, many times, and it's never ended quite the way that they hoped. The 2006 war that we covered earlier was only one of
Oh, the 2006 war, because we just watched a video yesterday about a war that Israel fought with, I think it was Egypt, Syria, and maybe Lebanon. And they won. And that's how the Palestine war or the thing started. So
quite the way that they hoped. The 2006 war,
but that was like in 1967. So
that we covered earlier, was only one of several ventures, or perhaps more accurately, misadventures that Israel has made into its neighbor. In fact, the 2006 operation was supposed to be the one that corrected the mistakes made during their 1982 invasion, which is really the one that should weigh heaviest on policymakers' minds today. Israel went into Lebanon that year to destroy the Palestine Liberation Organization's operations there, and in a narrow military sense, they succeeded. But the occupation that followed, 18 years of it, was what helped to produce Hezbollah in the first place. So, when they did roll in back in 2006, the idea was a limited campaign that would degrade Hezbollah's capability and buy time without repeating the open-ended, bogged-down quagmire of previous generations. Instead, the group rebuilt faster and stronger than before, using the post-war period to amass the very arsenal that kicked off this current edition. There's a version of this story in which the current moment follows the same script. Even a severely weakened Hezbollah retains the capacity for an asymmetric campaign, IED attacks, sniper operations, that sort of thing, which could make governing southern Lebanon a nightmare for years without requiring anything close to the more conventional military capability the group just lost. And then there's the distinct possibility that Israel ends up crushing Hezbollah, but also ends up inadvertently creating another resistance group entirely, one that may be even more extreme. That said, though, the situation today is genuinely different, first and foremost because the Lebanese state is the one driving the push to restore its sovereignty, backed by a president who seems absolutely determined to disarm the militants on his territory once and for all. All of this is the complete opposite from 1982 and 2006, where it was variously an Israeli occupation force imposing order from the outside and an international community with very little legitimacy, respectively. This willingness was a long time in the making, but now that it's surfaced, it doesn't appear likely to be disappearing anytime soon. To put it simply, Hezbollah's existence has shafted millions of Lebanese these past few years. The Beirut port explosion in 2020 that killed over 200 people and devastated parts of the city. Hezbollah controlled that port that killed over 200 people and devastated past few years. The Beirut port explosion in 2020 that killed over 200 people and devastated parts of the city. Hezbollah controlled that port and later used their political powers to cover up any potential role they had, even as the currency dropped in value and 70% of Lebanese fell below the poverty line. For millions of Lebanese, including plenty who had tolerated Hezbollah's armed status as a necessary evil, the port blast and aftermath really laid bare what the state within a state meant in practice. This was all the more clear during the 2024 war, which caused massive destruction throughout the entire country, including...
I know, right? Fendi does not agree with that. That looked horrifying.
In the capital, and displaced over 1 million people, all because a paramilitary the country couldn't control decided to open a front against Israel on behalf of Tehran. By this point, Hezbollah wasn't the group going to war against the foreign occupying force. They were the foreign-backed force going to war whether the country wanted to or not. By mid-2025, 86% of Lebanese opposed entering direct conflict with Israel to support Palestine, 79% believed only the army should hold weapons, and confidence in the Lebanese armed forces sat at 94%. Even among Hezbollah's Shia base in the country, over half viewed Iran negatively by April last year, and around a fifth described the group's regional entanglements in explicitly negative terms. Whether or not any of that translates into Hezbollah actually being dismantled this time around is an open question, not least because the Lebanese armed forces are being asked to take on a job that they, at least at this moment, are spectacularly ill-equipped to carry out. On paper, the LAF claims roughly 80,000 troops, not exactly something to write home about. But that's just on paper. In practice, the currency collapses reduced their salaries to somewhere between $50 and $100 a month, and many soldiers have taken second jobs just to survive. They lack heavy armor, precision munitions, and any fight.
That's really sad too. To be underpaid as a soldier, like, is there a more respectful job than that?
To somewhere between $50 and $100 a month, and many soldiers have taken second jobs just to survive. They lack heavy armor, precision munitions, and any fighter jets whatsoever. And when you're paying soldiers poverty wages while asking them to conform to a group that has historically run its own banking networks and an estimated $18 billion cash economy, well, we think you can figure out how that goes. And even if the army is somehow able to enforce the ban fully, Hezbollah has ingrained itself deeply in the country's institutions. They run schools, hospitals, and social services that millions of Shia depend on in a country whose government is in no position to provide those things. For all of that, though, Lebanon genuinely does have several factors going for it that it hasn't had in a very long time. A government that actually wants to take back control, a population that's demanding it to do so, and a regional landscape that's working to assist that effort. For a country that spent the last 2 decades watching a paramilitary largely run its own foreign policy from within, the fact that we're even having this conversation is itself noteworthy. This conflict may not turn out to be the true end of Hezbollah, but to use the old cliche, it could turn out to be, at least, the beginning of the end. Thank you for watching.
Wow, that was a lot of information packed into one video, guys. I'm not gonna lie, it was a little bit hard to follow because it's a lot. It's a lot of information, a lot of names, and a lot of things happening right now. But I hope that you found that video informative. Simon definitely does a very good job of explaining all sorts of things. And I'm pretty glad that I found his channel, so hope you guys enjoy it as well. Thank you for joining me for this video. Guys, please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!